President's talked about seeking unity on this bill, but also being clear-eyed when there's policy differences. So I'm wondering if after this call, which is with sort of the bipartisan coalition that you'd need to get this bill passed, if you expect to know whether the White House will pursue legislation, bipartisan legislation, or sort of head towards legislation through reconciliation. And I'm also wondering if you could talk about what sort of red lines will be, the point at which you say, okay, if you're not willing to negotiate about this in the bill, we're going to just start working with Democrats, as Speaker Pelosi and others have encouraged you to do.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'd say two things to that. The first is, if you look at the elements of the American Rescue Plan, it was designed with a bottom-up focus on what are experts saying is the actual need. What's the actual need to get schools open? What's the actual need to have a national vaccination distribution plan to underwrite the strategy that you heard Dr. Fauci and the president talk about yesterday? And what's the need to support families and businesses during this transition? And the second thing is that as a result of that, I think we're seeing a lot of support. As I said, bipartisan mayors, bipartisan governors, business organizations, Chamber of Commerce, Business Roundtable, economists across the board saying this is an appropriate response to an unprecedented economic circumstance. So that's the approach that we are taking, and that's the perspective that we are bringing here. And I think that we are heartened to see that kind of support. And that's the conversation that we're going to have with members of Congress, be they Republicans or Democrats, including, looking at where we are, where we've come over the last year and the lessons we've learned, that without decisive action, we know the consequences. And so now is a moment not to undershoot or to wait and see. Now is a moment to act.
Right. I guess my question is, I think a lesson that a lot of President Obama and others have talked about from the ACA fight was continuing to court Republican support beyond a point of it being productive. And so I'm wondering, for you guys, what is the decision point going to be where you might have Republican mayors, but it doesn't look like you have Republican senators right now. At what point do you say this is no longer worth kind of pushing forward?
We're making the case. We are engaging. We're having conversations. We're listening. And we are also focused on the urgency and the need to act. And so, what I can tell you is that's where the president's focus is. That's where the vice president's focus is. That'll continue to be our focus. Is we want to engage and we want to act, and that's going to be what guides us here.
It's got to be the last one. But Brian will come back.
Thank you for doing this, Brian. Back to the point of the objections of some of these Republican senators who have already spoken out. They say they just passed $900 million or so at the end of the year. Most of it isn't even out yet. How do you know, if that money hasn't gotten into the system yet, that you even need to release more at this point? Why move ahead with $1 trillion plan if the $900 million that's already been approved hasn't even gotten out there?
Sure. Well, first of all, we waited for 6 months or more before Congress acted, and so really a lot of what that $900 billion was doing was filling a hole in the second half of 2020 that desperately needed to be filled, and so this is not an issue of Congress acting too much. It's an issue of not acting enough. And the second is, if you look at the components of the $900 billion, again, we could go line by line, but these are resources that are either already out the door or are addressing economic challenges or public health challenges that were in the rearview mirror. So as we find ourselves today, looking forward, we need a very decisive set of actions if we are actually going to get schools open, if we're actually going to get a vaccination program up and running. And I think that the case that we will make is that today we're not where we need to be. And if we go line by line in the American Rescue Plan, these provisions have been designed based on an assessment of need. And we think they're actually going to absolutely be necessary. So, I think that looking forward, we're quite confident that this is the prudent assessment of needs.
And I want to clarify two quick things. How many federal employees or federal contractors are making minimum wage right now? Do you guys know?
So I don't have an estimate of that right now.
And then last night you said that there are roughly 8 million people who haven't received their stimulus checks.
Yes.
How do you find them?
So it's a great question. This is principally an issue associated with people who are non-filers, so they're not filing income taxes, in most cases because they don't make enough money to need to file federal income taxes. And so as a result, the way that the IRS and the Treasury Department in the previous administration has focused on getting those checks out has been to work through the tax system. But those are people who are legally entitled to those checks, so we have a number of strategies that we're going to pursue, and that today we'll start with the president's executive order to direct the Department of Treasury to consider a whole range of efforts, including creating an online portal that would allow people to easily identify if they're eligible, to work through counterpart organizations to actually affirmatively do outreach to communities where we know there are significant numbers of these families and these individuals, to let people know that they may be available. Some of this is education outreach as well. And I would just, it's a little connected to what I was saying about small business as well. What the president is directing all of us to do is to really focus on the affirmative steps that we can take, and an affirmative strategy to say it's not enough to just say, well, if folks don't know or if they don't have a network, then they're left out in the cold. We're gonna work both directly in what the federal government can do and with partner organizations to try to make sure that every American who's entitled to a benefit is actually receiving it.
But if there's someone out there right now who hears you saying this and realizes I'm eligible and I haven't gotten it, right now today, is there a way for them to raise their hand and say, send me my check?
Well, starting today, we're going to start a process to make that a lot easier for families, including being able to go online and do that. But that's work that's going to start today.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.